Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we're talking about the Capitol Center, which is a distressed office opportunity in Denver's downtown civic core. Our recommendation is to invest subject to conditions, and our thinking about why the property is compelling has evolved over time. Initially, we centered on acquiring an unoccupied office property cheaply and leasing it up. After studying the competition and the marketing feedback, we believe that more important asset may actually be control of the underlying city block and the optionality that comes with owning a city block. To understand that argument, we first need to understand exactly where this property is located. At the Denver scale, the property sits in the heart of the central city. At the Civic Core scale, it is surrounded by Colorado's government and legal institutions. And within a short walking radius are the state capitol, Civic Center, Judicial Center, and major office properties such as the Wells Fargo Center. For a government relations firm, law firm, trade association, or public policy organization, this location can be part of the tenant's business model. And that changes the way we should think about what we are actually buying. At a $5 million acquisition basis, at approximately 1.73 acres, or roughly 75,000 square feet of land, this would be controlled for about $66 per land square foot. Now, that is a major reframing. This is not simply a large, empty 1960s era office tower. This acquisition potentially gives us a full civic core site, CMX 12 zoning, the historic trust building, parking income, plus a future development opportunity. The tower may or may not ultimately be the highest value use of the property, but control of this land location is very difficult to replicate. Now, of course, we still have to deal with what exists on the site today. Now, four characteristics give us downside protection with optionality. First, the parking operation reportedly generates more than $350,000 of annual net income. Second, approximately 4.5 million of renovations were already completed by prior ownership. Third, CMX 12 zoning provides mixed use flexibility. And lastly, the historic buildings may qualify for federal and state rehabilitation incentives. More importantly, we don't need every one of these sources of value to work simultaneously. They give us several ways to create or preserve value. Now, the office market is still the biggest reason to be cautious. Denver vacancy remains elevated and the market remains distressed. That means tenant has alternatives and landlords must compete aggressively and lease up cannot simply be assumed. This is exactly why we don't want to justify the investment by saying Denver office will recover. The market weakness is actually why the acquisition basis may be available, but it also forces us to be disciplined about what we do after we acquire it. Now, the strongest tenants for this location are not generic office users. We are targeting government contractors, law firms, consultants, associations, nonprofits, and public affairs organizations that derive value from proximity to the capital, judicial system, and government institutions. That distinction matters because these users have a stronger reason to remain in the civic core than a tenant whose employees can work from almost anywhere remotely. But location alone still does not solve the leasing problem. Now, when we compare the existing tower directly against the competition, we discovered why. Now, this slide answers one of the most important questions in this presentation. Why would a tenant choose Capital Center over all the other discounted office space nearby? The answer is that price alone is not enough. Our model of rent is around $21.91 per square foot on an FSG equivalent basis. Nearby properties such as 1500 Grant and Denver Tower are already offering space around that same economic level. The corner office offers significantly improved product, and the settler provides turnkey finish solutions. So there is already a lot of inexpensive, improved Class A and B office inventory. That leads to a critical conclusion. We cannot expect the existing tower to win merely because it is cheap. Now, this is where the investment becomes interesting again. At approximately $66 per land square foot, our proposed acquisition basis is materially below several nearby directional redevelopment benchmarks. The comparison ranges from approximately $104 to more than $160 per land square footage. These are not identical properties, and this is not an appraisal, but directionality. It suggests that the acquisition price may be supported not only by the existing buildings, but by the underlying site itself. In other words, it is the tower proved difficult to lease. We may still own valuable urban land at a relatively low cost basis. Now, that brings us to the challenge. Instead of forcing tenants into an older commodity office building, what if we eventually deliver the product this location deserves? Conceptually, that could be a modern, capital facing, Class A legal and public affairs center with glass, premium views, capital facing boardrooms, flexible professional suites, a hospitality oriented lobby, secure parking with a rooftop terrace. This is not our current underwriting case, and the image is purely conceptual. The point is strategic. If the location is premium, but the office product is obsolete, one option is eventually to change that product rather than discount it forever. Now, we would not build this on spec. Denver office vacancy makes that far too risky. Our redevelopment discipline is acquire the site cheaply, preserve parking with the existing income, complete entitlement and design work, then require meaningful pre leasing before construction. Our proposed gate is roughly 40 to 50% pre lease commitments. No pre lease, no construction. Now, that allows us to control the site without making an immediate speculative bet on a new office tower. Now, this gives the investment two potential paths. Path one is the lower capital strategy. Selectively lease the existing tower if the economics work, preserve parking income, and maintain optionality. Now, path two is redevelopment. If tenant demand, pre-leasing, and residual land economics support it, create a modern, best-in-class, Class A office tower asset. Both path begins with the same discipline. Acquire the property at sufficiently low cost basis. This is why optionality is one of the investment's strongest characteristics. Now, our acquisition structure deliberately uses relatively little debt. The base capitalization shown here is approximately 9.5 million with 2.5 million of debt with about 7.2 million of equity. the assumed bridge rate is 10.75%. The logic behind that is that we already have substantial operating risk. We don't need to amplify it with excessive financial leverage. Also, this capital stack relates primarily to the acquisition and existing building strategy. A future redevelopment will require a completely separate development capitalization and will only occur after the pre-leasing gate of 40 to 50% is met. Now, our ability to control price is our most immediate protection. The lower the purchase basis, the more flexibility we have to lease the existing building, hold the site, or pursue redevelopment later. For the revised analysis, I would characterize approximately 5 million as the maximum acquisition basis we are comfortable underwriting without substantially stronger evidence. The important principle is not the exact auction number, it's that we refuse to let competitive bidding erase the reason the opportunity was attractive in the first place. So, after adding the direct competitors, land comparisons, and redevelopment analysis, our conclusion actually becomes more nuanced. The case for investing in the existing office tower alone is weaker than we originally believed because the competition is abundant and fierce. But the case for controlling the entire site at a distressed basis may be much stronger and a more compelling case. Therefore, our recommendation remains invest, subject conditions, but with a broader thesis. Acquire only at a basis that gives us flexibility, preserves income, tests selective lease up, and earn the right to pursue redevelopment only if the real tenant demand supports it. If the price rises beyond our margin of safety, we walk away and save our money for another day. Now, these are supporting sources supporting the property information, Denver market analysis, market cycle work, and auction assumptions. The redevelopment concept is an analytical extension of that underlying research rather than a claim that a new tower is already entitled or financially committed. Thank you and have a wonderful day.